Our top story, Ukrainian President Zelensky has challenged the UN to act immediately or dissolve yourself altogether during a blistering address in which he showed a harrowing video of dead bodies he said were victims of Russian atrocities. Likening Russia's actions in Ukrainian cities such as Bucha to violence carried out by terrorists such as the Islamic State group, Zelensky called on the 15-member council, which aims to ensure international peace and security, to expel Russia so it cannot block decisions about its own aggression, its own war.
This is no different from other terrorists such as Daesh who occupied some territories. And here it is done by a member of the United Nations Security Council, destroying internal unity, borders, countries, and taking the right of more than a dozen of countries. The civilians were crushed by tanks while sitting in their cars in the middle of the road, just for their pleasure. Women were raped and killed in front of their children. Their tongues were pulled out only because the aggressor did not hear what they wanted to hear from them. Now the world can see that what Russian military did in Bucha while keeping the city under their occupation. But the world has yet to see what they have done in other occupied cities and regions of our country.
India too expressed concern at the reports of civilian killings in Ukraine's Bucha and supported the call for an independent investigation in the strongest statement in the UN Security Council so far.
Madam President, the situation in Ukraine has not shown any significant improvement since the Council last discussed the issue. The security situation has only deteriorated, as well as its humanitarian consequences. Recent reports of civilian killings in Bucha are deeply disturbing. We unequivocally condemn these killings and support the call for an independent investigation.
The United States and Western allies now plan to pile additional sanctions on Russia after the emergence of the troubling new evidence of war crimes in Ukraine. According to the White House, that will take place today. The new penalties will include a ban on all new investment in Russia. Among the other measures being taken against Russia are greater sanctions on its financial institutions and state-owned enterprises, and sanctions on government officials and their family members, according to White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki.
In coordination with the G7 and the EU, an additional sweeping package of sanctions measures that will impose costs on Russia, send it further down the road of economic, financial, and technological isolation. This will include a ban on all new investment in Russia, and increased sanctions on financial institutions and state-owned enterprises in Russia, and sanctions on Russian government officials and their family members. These measures will degrade key instruments of Russian state power, impose acute and immediate economic harm on Russia, and hold accountable the Russian kleptocracy that funds and supports Putin's war. So this is going to be done in coordination with others.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov accused Ukraine on Tuesday of sabotaging talks with Russia. He specifically warned that Moscow will not accept the Ukrainian demand that a prospective agreement should envisage an immediate pullout of Russian troops to be followed by a referendum securing the deal.
У нас есть все основания полагать, что сделано это было для того, чтобы отвлечь внимание от переговорного процесса, отвлечь внимание от того, что украинская сторона уже после Стамбула стала отыгрывать назад, пыталась выдвигать все новые условия, а как только западные СМИ разогнали фальшивку про город Буча, украинские переговорщики попытались вообще прервать переговорный процесс.
UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson appealed directly to Russian citizens and urged them to bypass state media to learn the truth about the war in Ukraine. Speaking in Russian at the start of his address, Johnson said the Russian people deserve the truth. You deserve the facts. Johnson spoke of the grisly images that appear to show dead Ukrainian civilians in the streets after Russian troops pulled back from Kiev.
The reports are so shocking and so sickening. It's no wonder your government is seeking to hide them from you. Your president knows that if you could see what was happening, you would not support his war. He knows that these crimes betray the trust of every Russian mother who proudly waves goodbye to her son as he heads off to join the military. And he knows that they are a stain on the honor of Russia itself, a stain that will only grow larger and more indelible every day as this war continues. But don't just take my word for it. All you need is a VPN connection to access independent information from anywhere in the world. And when you find the truth, share it.
External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar on Tuesday spoke with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken ahead of the 2+2 dialogue. Taking to Twitter, Mr. Jaishankar said that they discussed the latest developments pertaining to Ukraine, spoke to Secretary Blinken ahead of our consultations, discussed bilateral issues and the latest developments pertaining to Ukraine, is what Mr. Jaishankar tweeted. India and the United States are scheduled to hold a 2+2 dialogue in Washington on the 11th of April. Dr. Jaishankar and Defense Minister Rajnath Singh will meet their counterparts, Mr. Blinken and U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. And a statement from spokesperson Ned Price said Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke with the Indian External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar to review regional and global priorities, including the situation in Ukraine. They agreed to remain closely coordinated on developments and look forward to meeting again soon. All right, some bad news for commuters. Petrol and diesel prices have been hiked again by 80 paise a litre today, taking the total increase in rates to 10 rupees per litre in the last 16 days. Petrol in Delhi will now cost 105.41 per litre, while diesel rates have gone up to 96.677 according to the price notifications. Rates have been increased across the country and vary from state to state depending on the local taxation. Here's what some people had to say.
जेब पे तो असर पड़ ही रहा है। पहले मेरे जो स्कूटी में पेट्रोल फिल होता था वो 300 350 में हो जाता है। आज की डेट में 450 पौने 500 रुपये में 500 के आसपास पेट्रोल बढ़ता है। पेट्रोल की कीमत बढ़ने से काफ़ी चीज़ इफेक्ट पड़ता है। हर चीज़ महंगी हो रही है। जो दूध सब्जी जो ट्रांसपोर्टेशन है, जो बाहर से हमारा ट्रांसपोर्टेशन आता है, दिल्ली में आता है, सब्जियाँ आती हैं, दूध आता है, उस पर असर बहुत महंगी हो रही है।
पेट्रोल का प्राइस जो बढ़ा जा रहा है उसको कंट्रोल तो करना ही चाहिए। अब कैसे कंट्रोल करेंगे अगर हम उसको यूज़ टू हो जाएंगे धीरे धीरे। जैसे अभी इलेक्शंस थे तो थोड़ा पेट्रोल का दाम कम कर दिया, फिर उसको वापस बढ़ा दिया, तो इससे यही होगा कि आदमी एक होता है मन में अपने सबकॉन्शियस माइंड में फीड कर लेता है चलो कोई नहीं बढ़ गया। अब इसी तरीके से धीरे धीरे बढ़ाते 80 से मतलब 104 पे आ गया है।
3 व्हीलर में भी करेंगे तो हमारे को उतना महंगा पड़ेगा, लेकिन अपनी स्कूटी चलाते हैं तो थोड़ा बहुत फ़र्क पड़ जाता है, क्योंकि माल लाना ले जाना होता है, उसमें फिर थोड़ा माल लदा हो तो ट्रैफिक वाले और चालान काट देते हैं, तो वो भी अब बहुत देखना पड़ता है।
All right, so that's what some of the people had to say. Let's go across to Himanshu for more. Himanshu, 10 rupees increase per litre in the last 16 days, and it doesn't seem to be any, relief on the horizon soon.
That's right, and that actually amounts to more than 10% increase in the price of both petrol and diesel. And that essentially would straight away means that those commuters who have to commute for long every day, their transport cost has gone up by 10%. In fact, the small transporters are also facing the heat. And Gagya, I think just a couple of days ago, I was interviewing a large number of the small transporters, and they're saying that our cost of transport has gone up by 10%, but the commensurate increase in the freight charges have not been done because the customers are not ready to hike the price. And remember, this is the time of when the economy is still recovering from COVID. And large number of people had loss of income during the COVID phase. We all know that. And so because of this, this is pinching the Aam Aadmi more. The problem is that the crude oil prices remain above $100 per barrel in the international crude oil market. And that would essentially mean that there is still pressure on the Indian oil companies. The other important thing is that 4.5 months of non-revision, that means no change in petrol and diesel prices, at a time when crude oil prices are going up, the oil company officials tell us that they are still 2 to 3 rupees, at least 2 to 3 rupees behind the price revision that was necessary just to offset the cost of the rise in the crude oil prices. So clearly, bad time for common people. And if this uncertainty about Ukraine war and the volatility in international crude oil market continues, then I think relief may not be in sight, at least for next few days, Kaji.
All right, so no relief soon. Thanks so much, Himanshu, for joining us with those details. Time for us to slip into a short break. Coming up on the other side, how meat is no longer available in parts of Delhi after the orders by two BJP mayors. Welcome back. News now from the national capital. And the South Delhi Municipal Corporation Mayor has issued a directive to the SDMC Commissioner asking him to ban all meat shops located in his jurisdiction. During Navratri, meat shop owners claim the order will result in losses worth lakhs of rupees. Here's a report.
Petrol and diesel prices are spiraling, but municipality elections in Delhi and Mumbai mean that it's communal divisive issues which are being raked up. In Delhi, meat shops have shut at the high-end INA market, and some restaurants aren't serving non-vegetarian food after the BJP mayor of the local municipality called for a ban on the sale of meat during Navratri. 65-year-old Manjeet Kaur, who runs a meat shop, estimates her loss at over 1 lakh rupees.
ये मेरे फादर इन लॉ जब से पाकिस्तान से आए यही काम कर रहे हैं।
तो मतलब पहली बार ऐसा कोई ऑर्डर आया है कि मटन शॉप पे?
नहीं, फर्स्ट टाइम। मेरे को भी 25 साल हो गए यहाँ बैठते, कभी ऑर्डर ही नहीं दिया। जहाँ स्टार्टिंग में देते भी हम नराते हैं, मार्केट ही नहीं खुलेगी। अब मंडे को 2 दिन का माल आता है, मंडे ट्यूसडे, और दोनों दिन का माल बेकार जाएगा। अलाइव चिकन होता है, तो हमारा तो नुकसान है ना। या तो संडे को बता देते हैं, हम मंडे ट्यूसडे का माल नहीं मिला।
चिकन लेने के लिए यहाँ पे आया था। मेरा चिकन यहीं से सप्लाई जाता है। मैं रोज़ यहाँ से ख़रीदता हूँ चिकन अपने रेस्टोरेंट के लिए। तो आया, मैंने देखा दुकान बंद है। जो यहाँ पे ओनर हैं जिनकी दुकान से चिकन लेता हूँ, उनको पूछा, वो कह रहे हैं आप देख लो, आपको 5-6 दिन और स्ट्रगल करना पड़ेगा क्योंकि शॉप तो बंद रहने का ऑर्डर है
कस्टमरों में। ठीक है ना, तो ये दुकान कभी बंद नहीं हुआ कभी भी। यार पहले बार ऐसे होगा, पता नहीं क्या।
The South Delhi Mayor Mukesh Suryan claims he has taken the decision based on a survey he conducted, but hasn't shared details of this. Yet he says he will strictly implement his ban, stating that meat shops cause hygiene issues in surrounding areas.
ये फैसला तो अच्छा है और आपको दिखाना चाहता हूँ, लोग आके मिठाई खिला करके जा रहे हैं और जो ओनर्स हैं उन्होंने भी इस फैसले का स्वागत किया है। उसका एक हमने फैसला लिया और हम इसको इम्प्लीमेंट भी कर रहे हैं। मैं आपको चैनल के माध्यम से बताना चाहता हूँ।
The East Delhi Mayor, also of the BJP, is following suit. All this ahead of the proposed reunification of the MCD and elections of the civic body.
मीट विक्रेताओं से निवेदन है कि इन दिनों में पूर्वी दिल्ली नगर निगम में जितने भी मीट विक्रेता हैं वे अपनी दुकानों को बंद रखें। इसमें आपसी सौहार्द बढ़ेगा, एक दूसरे के त्योहार का सम्मान होगा।
The order by SDMC to shut down meat shops is being veiled as an order to respect the sentiments of a community during Navratri and an issue of hygiene. However, it is more of an assault on right to choice. And equally concerning is the fact that because of this diktat, lakhs of people across the national capital are now set to incur financial losses. In Mumbai, the BJP as well as MNS have begun protests against Azan over loudspeakers. A local BJP leader has promised a free loudspeaker for any temple. Elections in Mumbai's municipality, which is the country's richest, are expected to be held next month. And the opposition MNS raised the issue of loudspeakers on mosques, which the BJP welcomed.
गृह विभाग की यही भूमिका है, किसी ने भी समाज में एक डिस्टेंस निर्माण करने के लिए ऐसी कोई भी कृति नहीं करनी चाहिए, नहीं होना चाहिए। इसके बारे में भी आज मैंने कुछ चर्चा रखी है।
Shiv Sena, which has been doing the Hindutva politics, is in power in BMC for the last 25 years, and that's the reason why BJP and MNS both are attacking Shiv Sena on the issue of Hindutva.
With camera person Praveen Rohit, Sushil Rathi, and correspondent Sohit Mishra in Mumbai, Akshay Dongre for NDTV.
And BJP MP Parvesh Singh Verma from Delhi has extended his support to the controversial ban on meat during Navratras announced by two Delhi mayors and has said that the ban should be extended across the country.
मैं चाहता हूं कि तीनों नगर निगम इसको लागू करें, पूरे दिल्ली एनसीआर, और नहीं पूरा देश इसको लागू करे। देश में रमजान आते हैं या कोई क्रिसमस का त्योहार आता है तो सभी हिंदू भी उसके धर्म का पालन करते हैं, उनका सम्मान करते हैं। ऐसे ही जब हिंदुओं का त्योहार आए तो सभी को एक होकर देश की संस्कृति को आगे रखकर हमारे धर्मों का स्वागत करना चाहिए। तो कृपया उन सभी का सम्मान रखते हुए सभी इसका पालन करें तो अच्छा रहेगा। जितनी भी मोदी सरकार की स्कीम है वो सभी के लिए, सभी धर्म के लिए है।
Welcome back. In news this morning, Akar Patel, former head of Amnesty International in India, tweeted saying that he was stopped from leaving India at the Bengaluru airport. He tweeted, "I'm on the exit control list, got passport back through the court order specifically for this trip to the US. Immigration says the CBI has put me on the list. Why?" Akar Patel was stopped from leaving the country on the lookout circular opened against him by the CBI in the amnesty case related to charges of alleged FCRA violations. Let's go across to Arvind for more. So Arvind, after Rana Ayub was stopped from leaving the country, now Akar Patel, another person who's known to criticize the government, stopped from leaving the country despite having a court order.
Yeah, Gargi, Akar Patel, who was then the executive of Amnesty, has been stopped from leaving the country from the Bangalore airport on the lookout circular that has been opened by the Central Bureau of Investigation. CBI in 2019 had registered cases against several entities linked to Amnesty for alleged FCRA violations. So what we are being told is that without FCRA violation, the Amnesty India had illegally bought in somewhere around 36 crores, and that's why the agency had registered FIR for alleged FCRA violation. In that particular case, the role of Akar Patel, who was then the executive of Amnesty India, was also under probe. So what you are being told is that the agency has completed the investigation, but during the course of the investigation, the agency has opened a lookout circular in order to stop the person of interest and also accused from leaving the country. In one such lookout circular, it has also been opened against Akar Patel, and on the back of that particular lookout circular only, today Akar Patel has been stopped from leaving the country at the Bangalore airport. So what the agency is saying that the lookout circular has been opened to ensure that all the accused remain in India for helping the investigation, so that they have opened this lookout circular.
Right, and this court order which he claims he has, through which he got his passport back, so this lookout circular supersedes that?
Gagi, the court order that he is referring to, that pertains to a different case. The court order is from Surat Court, and that deals with a completely different case. In that particular case, he has got back his passport. But this is a CBI case that has been registered in Delhi. So in this particular Delhi-based case that has been registered by CBI, the agency has opened a lookout circular, but the passport that he has got is from a completely different case.
All right. Thanks so much, Arvind, for joining us with those details. And Twitter says it is working on an edit button for tweets after this poll put out by Elon Musk. Elon Musk disclosed a 9.2% stake in Twitter as well and started the poll on the long-awaited feature that the company has been already working on. As Twitter said that, yes, we've been working on an edit feature since last year. Hello and welcome. You're watching Good Morning India. I'm Gargi Rawat. Our top story: Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky challenged the UN to act immediately or dissolve yourself altogether during a blistering address in which he showed a harrowing video of dead bodies he said were victims of Russian atrocities. Likening Russia's actions in Ukrainian cities such as Bucha to violence carried out by terrorists such as the Islamic State group, Zelensky called on the 15-member council, which aims to ensure international peace and security, to expel Russia so it cannot block decisions about its own aggression, its own war.
This is no different from other terrorists such as Daesh, who occupied some territories. And here it is done by a member of the United Nations Security Council, destroying internal unity, borders, countries, and taking the right of more than a dozen of countries. The civilians were crushed by tanks while sitting in their cars in the middle of the road. just for their pleasure. Women were raped and killed in front of their children. They were, their tongues were pulled out only because the aggressor did not hear what they wanted to hear from them. Now the world can see that what Russian military did in Bucha while keeping the city under their occupation. But the world has yet to see what they have done in other occupied cities and regions of our country.
India expressed concern at reports of civilian killings in Ukraine's Bucha and supported the call for an independent investigation. It was the strongest statement from India yet at the UN Security Council.
Madam President, the situation in Ukraine has not shown any significant improvement since the Council last discussed the issue. The security situation has only deteriorated, as well as its humanitarian consequences. Recent reports of civilian killings in Bucha are deeply disturbing. We unequivocally condemn these killings and support the call for an independent investigation.
I think what the president's objective is and his responsibility is to make decisions that are in the interests of the United States and the national security of the United States and the American people. And that is not to go to war with Russia. It is to do everything in our power to hold them accountable, to support efforts through international systems to do exactly that, and to provide military assistance, security assistance, and support to the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian government. That's exactly what we're doing. But it is not in our interests or in the interests of the American people for us to be in a war with Russia.
The United States and Western allies now plan to pile additional sanctions on Russia on Wednesday after the emergence of troubling new evidence of war crimes in Ukraine, according to the White House. The new penalties will include a ban on all new investment in Russia and, among other measures, will be greater sanctions on its financial institutions.
In coordination with the G7 and the EU, an additional sweeping package of sanctions measures that will impose costs on Russia, send it further down the road of economic, financial, and technological isolation. This will include a ban on all new investment in Russia, and increased sanctions on financial institutions and state-owned enterprises in Russia, and sanctions on Russian government officials and their family members. These measures will degrade key instruments of Russian state power, impose acute and immediate economic harm on Russia, and hold accountable the Russian kleptocracy that funds and supports Putin's war. So this is going to be done in coordination with others.
Also news from Russia, where the foreign minister has spoken out as well, and Russian foreign minister Sergei Lavrov accused Ukraine of sabotaging talks with Russia. He specifically warned that Moscow will not accept the Ukrainian demand that a prospective agreement should envisage an immediate pullout of Russian troops to be followed by a referendum securing the deal.
У нас есть все основания полагать, что сделано это было для того, чтобы отвлечь внимание от переговорного процесса, отвлечь внимание от того, что украинская сторона уже после Стамбула стала отыгрывать назад, пыталась выдвигать все новые условия, а как только западные СМИ разогнали фальшивку про город Буча, украинские переговорщики попытались вообще прервать переговорный процесс.
A member of Ukraine's parliament said the United Nations, NATO and the International Criminal Court had failed her country. In an interview with Sky News, Kyra Rudik said the organization had failed to stop the killing of innocent civilians in Ukraine.
You're talking to Geneva Convention to me? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me right now? The world is watching how we are dying and talking about Geneva Convention. Maybe you should call Putin and talk to him about Geneva Convention. I think UN failed, NATO failed, and criminal courts failed. So we will have to do it by ourselves, and we are ready to do it. Because the organizations that were supposed to keep peace allowed for all this horror to happen in my country.
External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar spoke with the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken ahead of the 2+2 dialogue. Taking to Twitter, Dr. Jaishankar said they discussed the latest developments pertaining to Ukraine, spoke to Secretary Blinken ahead of our 2+2 consultations, discussed bilateral issues and the latest developments in Ukraine, is what Mr. Jaishankar tweeted. The 2+2 dialogue will take place in Washington on the 11th of April. Dr. Jaishankar and Defense Minister Rajnath Singh will meet their counterparts, Mr. Blinken and U.S. Defense Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. A statement from the spokesperson in the U.S., Ned Price, said Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke with the Indian External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar to review regional and global priorities, including the situation in Ukraine. They agreed to remain closely coordinated on developments and look forward to meeting again soon. All right, let's shift focus now on the show. And the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, has said in its latest report that no amount of climate action after 2030 will be good enough to limit the rise in global temperatures within 1.5 degrees Celsius if the emissions pathway is not altered significantly in the next few years. UN scientists have laid out a plan essentially calling for a revolution in how we produce energy and power our world. The report mentions the carbon-free and low-carbon technologies available, as well as the potential for digitization through robotics, artificial intelligence, for supporting energy efficiency and renewable energy. Well, to talk more about climate action, we're joined by Rachel Kite, Dean of the Fletcher School, Tufts University, USA, someone who's worked on climate issues for decades, is member of the UN Secretary General's high-level advisory group on climate change and is visiting here in India. Thank you so much for joining us on the program. And Ms. Kite, first, before we get into the IPCC report and again calling for radical change and turn towards green energy, it's become so difficult to focus on all these issues in the last couple of years, given that we're just emerging from a pandemic, that there's a war currently going on for us in the media and for people like you who've been fighting on issues of climate change for decades now.
Yeah, we have every reason for distraction: the global pandemic, economic dislocation, and now a war in Europe. But the climate imperative doesn't change. We have to tackle climate change. The way of life that we want to have and that some people still strive to have is not going to be possible with climate impacts. But if we tackle climate change, and this report shows that there is still room to do that, we have a lot of the things we need, then we can have the kind of life that we want to have. So we have to be able to have political leaders that can walk and chew gum at the same time. The science is very clear. We now need political action.
Absolutely, and it's important, to stay on course and to keep the focus there for us in the media, for climate leaders and for political leaders as well. Tell us more about what the IPCC has called for this, radical new path, and we have just 8 years to really make it happen.
Yeah, so basically what the report says is that even if all of the policies and plans that governments have already put in, have announced, if we adhered to all of those, we would still be at twice the level of warming that we need to be at. So we would be at 3.2 degrees and we need to be at 1.5. So we need to sort of have a handbrake and a hairpin turn. We need a fast turnaround, which means that we have to get ourselves off fossil fuels very, very quickly. We need to peak our emissions in 2025. 43% of all of the cuts in emissions that we need have to come this decade. It shows us that the fall in the price of renewable technology, although inflation is having an impact at the moment, means that this is actually going to be cheaper than perhaps many people realize. And then once we've got the renewable energy technology, we need to drive that through transportation, through buildings and the built environment. We have to drive it also then through the revolution in how we have heavy industry. And here in India, everybody's talking about green hydrogen as a way to continue to produce green steel, green cement, and then potentially being able to export green energy. So there's huge opportunity, but the time with which we have to sort of plan the sort of change in our trajectory, we've kind of run out of time. And so in developed countries, there's going to have to be a very swinging cut in energy use. We have to be very energy efficient, and we have to make the pivot to renewable energy immediately.
Right, but Dean Kite, for India, our concerns remain that, in our reaction to the IPCC report, we've said it's a global collective action problem that has to be addressed. There needs to be cooperation. And essentially, we mean that, we need help from developing countries, from developed countries, in terms of technology, in terms of, green energy as well. And that remains India's position. And we've said that we will continue to speak out for developing nations.
So I don't think, I think the Indian position is well understood. First of all, India has an extraordinary green growth story itself, which is underway, but nobody underestimates how complicated that is. There's a big social dimension to weaning India off coal and onto renewable energy. There will be an extraordinary upside to that, cleaner air, better jobs for more people in the future. But we understand that that's a difficult transition, and there needs to be international support for that. There also needs to be international support for ramping up renewable energy here and the new technologies that are being pioneered by Indian firms, because India's green story will also be a launching pad or a staging post for help to other developing countries, to the global south. So there is the potential for India to be a green engine of growth, not just in India, but across the global south. Obviously, you see that in the idea behind the International Solar Alliance, but we have to stop talking about it and start doing it. And I think that's why the international community has to come in behind India and help India succeed, because if India succeeds, the world succeeds.
Absolutely. And final words, are you hopeful that now with this report, hopefully we can at some point, maybe when this war ends, bring the focus back on this and the urgency that's needed?
Well, I think the war actually underlines or puts an exclamation point at the end of the sentence about we need to move to renewable energy. Obviously, this is a war which is entangled in Europe's dependence upon Russian hydrocarbons.
That's right.
Europe now has to move away. So I think it just underlines the fact that we've got no time and we need to work together to make this pivot.
All right, Dean Kai, thank you so much for speaking to us here at NDTV on this very, very urgent and important issue.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, time for us to slip into a short break. Coming up on the other side, petrol and diesel prices have been hiked yet again. We'll get you all the details. Welcome back. Petrol and diesel prices have been hiked again today by 80 paise a litre each, taking the total increase in rates in the last 16 days to 10 rupees per litre. So there's been a 10 rupee increase in rates in the last 16 days. Petrol in Delhi will now cost 105.41 per litre, while the diesel will cost 96.67 per litre, according to the notification. And rates have been increased across the country as well and vary from state to state depending on the local tax. Here's the reaction from some commuters this morning.
जेब पे तो असर पड़ ही रहा है। पहले मेरा जो स्कूटी में पेट्रोल फिल होता था वो 300 350 में हो जाता है। आज की रेट में 450 पौने 500 रुपये मेरा 500 के आसपास पेट्रोल बढ़ता है। पेट्रोल की कीमत बढ़ने से काफ़ी चीज़ इफेक्ट पड़ता है। हर चीज़ महंगी हो रही है। जो दूध सब्जी जो ट्रांसपोर्टेशन है, जो बाहर से हमारा ट्रांसपोर्टेशन आता है, दिल्ली में आता है, सब्जियाँ आती हैं, दूध आता है, उस पर असर बहुत महंगी हो रही है।
पेट्रोल का प्राइस जो बढ़ा जा रहा है उसको कंट्रोल तो करना ही चाहिए। अब कैसे कंट्रोल करेंगे अगर हम उसको यूज़ टू हो जाएंगे धीरे धीरे। जैसे अभी इलेक्शंस थे तो थोड़ा पेट्रोल का दाम कम कर दिया, फिर उसको वापस बढ़ा दिया, तो इससे यही होगा कि आदमी एक होता है मन में अपने सबकॉन्शियस माइंड में फीड कर लेता है चलो कोई नहीं बढ़ गया। अब इसी तरीके से धीरे धीरे बढ़ाते 80 से मतलब 104 पे आ गया है।
3 व्हीलर में भी करेंगे तो हमारे को उतना महंगा पड़ेगा, ले अपनी स्कूटी चलाते हैं तो थोड़ा बहुत फ़र्क पड़ जाता है, क्योंकि माल लाना ले जाना होता है, उसमें फिर थोड़ा माल लदा हो तो ट्रैफिक वाले और चालान काट देते हैं, तो वो भी अब बहुत देखना पड़ता है।
All right, commuters they're talking about the various issues that they're facing and the price rise. Let's go across to Sam, who joins us from Chennai. And Sam, here in Delhi, we're paying 105 per litre for petrol, but in Tamil Nadu, it's around 110?
That's right, it's 110 and 95 paise in the case of petrol, and it's 101 and above in the case of diesel. And we come to you from a petrol bunk at Mailapur, Gargi, and the story continues. Let's speak to a few consumers here. Thank you very much for your time. How do you look at this daily price hike?
These are all much expected after the polls. Every time when polls get over in national level, people are made ready their mind towards this price hike. But these are all not good to the public, because on every price hike, the common man is get affected. Every day, these are all...
Tell us about yourself. What do you do and how much does the price rise impact you?
It impacts me very much, because every day we are using this kind of thing. So for our commute from our home to office, on earlier for a week we used to put petrol for 300 rupees. But now the span has become, in 3 days of time, we have to put our petrol for 300 rupees. So how much this kind of tax are not going to make to use for the general public. So this can be like the state and central government are requested to revise this kind of price hike.
You see this impact in other prices of essential commodities?
Obviously, because the petrol and diesel rate, because every transportation of vegetables and other, even for daily commute, even a laborer who used to come to our for the job work, he may have a two-wheeler. So obviously this creates an impact on every price hike, either directly or indirectly.
Lastly, who do you think should reduce the price, reduce the taxes, central government or the state government?
As a general public, I want the price to be reduced. So either it may be the central government or from the state government, because this is not a blame game that you should do, I should do. The welfare of the public to be kept in mind.
Thank you very much for your time, and a sample of how the daily price rise in the case of fuel impacts the common person, Gargi. Of course, the worry now is this could lead to an escalation of prices in the case of essential commodities as well.
All right, Sam, thanks so much for joining us there. Sam getting us some voices from Chennai on the fuel hike. Welcome back. The South Delhi Municipal Corporation Mayor has issued a directive to the SDMC Commissioner asking him to ban all meat shops located in his jurisdiction during Navratris. Meat shop owners, however, claim the order will result in losses worth lakhs of rupees. Here's a report.
Petrol and diesel prices are spiraling, but municipality elections in Delhi and Mumbai mean that it's communal divisive issues which are being raked up. In Delhi, meat shops have shut at the high-end INA market, and some restaurants aren't serving non-vegetarian food after the BJP mayor of the local municipality called for a ban on the sale of meat during Navratri. 65-year-old Manjeet Kaur, who runs a meat shop, estimates her loss at over 1 lakh rupees.
ये मेरे फादर इन लॉ जब से पाकिस्तान से आए यही काम कर रहे हैं।
तो मतलब पहली बार ऐसा कोई ऑर्डर आया है कि मटन शॉप पे?
नहीं, फर्स्ट टाइम। मेरे को भी 25 साल हो गए यहाँ बैठते, कभी ऑर्डर ही नहीं दिया। जहाँ स्टार्टिंग में देते हैं, भी हम नराते हैं, मार्केट ही नहीं खुलेगी। अब मंडे को 2 दिन का माल आता है, मंडे ट्यूसडे, और दोनों दिन का माल बेकार जाएगा। अलाइव चिकन होता है, तो हमारा तो नुकसान है ना। या तो संडे को बता देते हैं, अब मंडे ट्यूसडे का माल नहीं डाला।
चिकन लेने के लिए यहाँ पे आया था। मेरा चिकन यहीं से सप्लाई जाता है। मैं रोज़ यहाँ से ख़रीदता हूँ चिकन अपने रेस्टोरेंट के लिए। तो आया, मैंने देखा दुकान बंद है। जो यहाँ पे ओनर हैं जिनकी दुकान से चिकन लेता हूँ, उनको पूछा, वो कह रहे हैं आप देख लो, आपको 5-6 दिन और स्ट्रगल करना पड़ेगा क्योंकि शॉप तो बंद रहने का ऑर्डर है।
कस्टमरों में, ठीक है ना, तो ये दुकान कभी बंद नहीं हुआ कभी भी। यार पहले बार ऐसे होगा, पता नहीं क्या।
The South Delhi Mayor Mukesh Suryan claims he has taken the decision based on a survey he conducted, but hasn't shared details of this. Yet he says he will strictly implement his ban, stating that meat shops cause hygiene issues in surrounding areas.
ये फैसला तो अच्छा है और आपको दिखाना चाहता हूँ, लोग आके मिठाई खिला करके जा रहे हैं और जो ओनर्स हैं उन्होंने भी इस फैसले का स्वागत किया है। उसका एक हमने फैसला लिया और हम इसको इम्प्लीमेंट भी कर रहे हैं। मैं आपको चैनल के माध्यम से बताना चाहता हूँ।
The East Delhi Mayor, also of the BJP, is following suit. All this ahead of the proposed reunification of the MCD and elections of the civic body.
मीट विक्रेताओं से निवेदन है कि इन दिनों में पूर्वी दिल्ली नगर निगम में जितने भी मीट विक्रेता हैं वे अपनी दुकानों को बंद रखें। इसमें आपसी सौहार्द बढ़ेगा, एक दूसरे के त्योहार का सम्मान होगा।
The order by SDMC to shut down meat shops is being veiled as an order to respect the sentiments of a community during Navratri and an issue of hygiene. However, it is more of an assault on right to choice. And equally concerning is the fact that because of this diktat, lakhs of people across the national capital are now set to incur financial losses. In Mumbai, the BJP as well as MNS have begun protests against Azan over loudspeakers. A local BJP leader has promised a free loudspeaker for any temple. Elections in Mumbai's municipality, which is the country's richest, are expected to be held next month. And the opposition MNS raised the issue of loudspeakers on mosques, which the BJP welcomed.
गृह विभाग की यही भूमिका है, किसी ने भी समाज में एक डिस्टेंस निर्माण करने के लिए ऐसी कोई भी कृति नहीं करनी चाहिए, नहीं होना चाहिए। इसके बारे में भी आज मैंने कुछ चर्चा रखी है।
Shiv Sena, which has been doing the Hindutva politics, is in power in BMC for the last 25 years, and that's the reason why BJP and MNS both are attacking Shiv Sena on the issue of Hindutva.
With camera person Praveen Rohit, Sushil Rathi and correspondent Sohit Mishra in Mumbai, Akshay Dongre for NDTV.
And BJP MP from Delhi, Parvesh Singh Verma, extended support for this controversial ban on meat during Navratras announced by the two Delhi mayors, and also said the ban should be extended across the country.
मैं चाहता हूं कि तीनों नगर निगम इसको लागू करें, पूरे दिल्ली NCR, और नहीं पूरा देश इसको लागू करे। देश में रमजान आते हैं या कोई क्रिसमस का त्योहार आता है तो सभी हिंदू भी उसके धर्म का पालन करते हैं, उनका सम्मान करते हैं। ऐसे ही जब हिंदुओं का त्योहार आए तो सभी को एक होकर देश की संस्कृति को आगे रखकर हमारे धर्मों का स्वागत करना चाहिए। तो कृपया उन सभी का सम्मान रखते हुए सभी इसका पालन करें तो अच्छा रहेगा। जितनी भी मोदी सरकार की स्कीम है वो सभी के लिए, सभी धर्म के लिए है।
Well, to talk more about the meat ban in Delhi, we're joined by Tavleen Singh, columnist and author, and India's Sundar Basu, food writer, and Zainab Sikandar, columnist with The Print. Tavleen Singh, I'd like to start with you. Your reaction to this ban of sorts. It's something that two mayors in Delhi, BJP mayors, have said. Apparently, it hasn't gone through the formal channels yet, but already meat shops are shut, many restaurants not serving meat.
I'm outraged by it because I am totally opposed to officially imposed religious fanaticism of this kind. We have lived peacefully for many years with all these festivals, and once we start taking this road, then why shouldn't Muslims demand that we all fast during Ramzan? I just want to make one more point. In countries where this kind of officially imposed religious fanaticism exists, you don't see tourists, you don't see modernity, you see a move backwards towards a very bad time.
And you feel that this is linked to upcoming municipal elections and this focus on these kind of communal issues?
I think actually these officials are actual fanatics. I actually believe that they do not know that there's no mention of vegetarianism, for instance, in the Ramayana. Vegetarianism is a new idea in Hinduism. There's always been meat eating, and they may stop during Navratri, but that doesn't mean you can impose this idea on people who are going to lose jobs, who's going to lose it's outrageous. There's nothing else to be said.
Right. And India, Sundar Basu, your reaction to this, and given that, Navratri is something that is very North India, in Delhi it's become very, very big over the last couple of years, but the capital being, this cosmopolitan place where we have people from everywhere arriving and working in the capital, to impose this kind of food restrictions, which only a few people follow, though the mayor did say that over 90% of the people are vegetarian during Navratris.
My humble question to everyone who is making this decision is that ultimately who is benefiting out of it? After 2 years of bloodbath in the economy and in the F&B sector in particular, we are slowly inching towards a normalcy. So we see over here, not only the meat sellers who are getting affected, the restaurants are also getting affected in terms of not being able to sell this. In a country where there are 70% of the population is non-veg eater, this comes as absolute shock. And what I see in the past few years, that every time the non-veg food becomes a soft target to pick up an issue. We can celebrate, we have been celebrated every festival possible in our own way. When it's a question of tolerance, my time of self-restraint, I cannot forcefully impact it or impose it on someone else, right? We can amicably celebrate Navratra and we can eat meat also. Nothing has changed in the last 2 or 3 decades in terms of the location of those meat shops and everything else. Like that lady said, that for the last 25 years, she hasn't seen something like this. What has changed overnight? That's my question. That is creating a degree of discomfort, as the ministers are saying, for the people who are celebrating Navratra. I have no answers to this.
Right, and the BJP MP even calling that it should be in place across the country. Zainab, Sikandar, your reaction to what we're seeing happening here in Delhi?
Firstly, I always keep saying this: India is still a democracy. India is still a secular state. We are not a theocracy. We don't work according to religion. Now, first they told us not to eat beef. Then, they told us how to get married and they named it love jihad. Then now suddenly they've told us how to wear clothes and it became the hijab row. Now they're telling us not to eat halal food. They call it, food jihad. They've started calling it food jihad. And now they've come to us simply not eating meat. Now, I understand religious sentiments, but there are many religions in India. And if we start following everybody's sentiments, then we'll probably not be able to live a normal life. Now, say for example, right now there are 10 days of Navratri. There's also Ramzan that is happening simultaneously at the same time. Whose religious sentiment should be given precedence? So I personally feel it's a very unfair sort of a argument anyway, that, based on religious sentiments, we are supposed to make choices, like the whole of India is supposed to make choices accordingly. In fact, I would like to also point out that this entire thing is very centered around Muslim economy. Because there have already been many statements made by BJP. Like, for example, BJP National Secretary C.T. Ravi said that halal food is economic jihad, and that's why we should stop eating halal food. But at the same time, someone like Piyush Goyal, who's the Commerce Minister, he had requested in 2019 to Indonesian government that please allow us to export halal meat. So BJP is actually confused themselves. They don't know what they actually want to convey to people. Sometimes they say one thing and another time they say another thing, depending on which election is happening at which time. So for me, this is absolute dirty politics, nothing more. MCD election is close, and that's the reason in Delhi this is being done, just to sort of, harness that kind of vote bank that BJP always sort of,
and a distraction perhaps from the more pertinent issues like, fuel hike, which we could have been discussing right now, but we're talking about this meat ban. And we're also joined by Vineet Vadhva, founder and CEO of FIO Restaurant and member of the National Restaurant Association of India. And earlier in this discussion, and India had raised this point that, restaurants are just about coming out of these last 2 years of the pandemic and lockdown, and now with more restrictions being announced, especially the meat ban. How has it affected your business, if you could tell us?
Gargi, so far there is no effect because we get our supplies directly from the abattoir or the wholesalers, and this order is basically for the retailers. So it's really not affected the supplies to us, and nor has
I think it's affected smaller restaurants more. Because in our report, we also had one individual who had actually come to buy supplies for his restaurant, a small restaurant that he had. And he said that now he can't fulfill orders at his restaurant because he couldn't get the supplies at INA Market.
Yes, I agree that there could be a few people being affected. But at the same time, I find the act very draconian. We don't know what we're heading in for. First was the beef, and then is this, and tomorrow it could be the halal issue. I mean, what started in UK is probably entering in here. I'm seeing some new developments, and we don't know what we have to prepare ourselves for.
Right. Tavleen Singh, you spoke about, that this affects the tourism, it affects various things, and given that it also creates so much uncertainty for people running restaurants, people involved in a particular trade. Suddenly one day a mayor wakes up and says that, for this period, no meat will be allowed. So these kind of uncertainties, you had it in Gujarat as well. Over the last couple of years, you've had these sort of decisions being made that no vendors near temples and nobody serving, non-vegetarian food near temples and schools, etc. In Haryana as well, at one point, there was some sort of a move that on Tuesday, meat shops shouldn't open. So more and more of this, and a lot of uncertainty given, who knows what will come up next.
It's not just the uncertainty. First, I agree with Zainab that a lot of it is targeted at Muslims. So all the employment opportunities or the jobs that Muslims do have almost deliberately been targeted, which is sickening, right? But the other problem is India has always had the image of being a tolerant democracy. We are not the kind of country where officials tell us what to eat, drink, wear. We're not a Muslim country for a start, right? And in Muslim countries where there are only Muslims living, that kind of thing would be fine if Muslims like it. But this is not. This is a very diverse country. I'm a Sikh. I've grown up eating meat and chicken and whatever else that came my way. And so who is some little two-bit official to tell me what I should eat or drink? But you know, you've had the chief minister of Bihar just recently saying people who drink are not Indians. What is going on?
Yes.
You know, I mean, they are actually fanatics who are suddenly trying to impose their fanaticism on us.
All right, and India, your comments on what this means for, you know, our image, these kind of diktats suddenly coming in, no meat during Navratri, no meat on Tuesdays, you know, which is being announced by officials here and there. What do you feel it does to our image?
I don't like this. I don't like this because every time I don't like my personal food choices, my personal food habits, or the way I would celebrate an event to be dictated by someone else, where I'm not violating or I'm not hurting anyone else's sentiment. The way I would love to celebrate Navratra, the way I would love to celebrate a Durga Puja, the way I would love to celebrate a Deepavali is absolutely mine. That's what makes me an Indian citizen, right? We all know that over here to Goddess Kali, in Kalighat, every day they offer a meat hope, right? That's mandatory. Right, there are people across India who would share Deepavali over mutton roast, right? So nowhere it's written, and non-vegetarian, non-veg eating has been there over centuries in Indian history. It has been mentioned. So we were never a vegetarian country. So from where is this coming in? Right? Every time you feel very, very skeptical and you get very, very worried that what new twist will come. Recently, I saw that on the back of a bhaji packet, because it was written in Urdu, it has now become a huge issue. Tomorrow you will say that I cannot chant the famous shairs of my beautiful poet Mirza Ghalib. He will be banned. Where are we heading to?
All right, you're talking about the controversy over a Haldiram packet that had Arabic at the back, perhaps, and it was taken up by a local channel. Zainab, Sikandar, final, thoughts and comments on this entire controversy and the uncertainty also that it raises, as in what next?
Yeah, I just want to say that, India shouldn't become a land of extremes. That is not the culture that we've had for thousands of years. We've been known, and I know these talks sound very cliche, that, we're a land of syncretism and, we should be tolerant and all that, but that is what Indians are. We are a democracy. We're extremely diverse. If we'll start boxing ourselves into, these petty ways of thinking of what to eat, how to dress, how to marry, India is just going to take a hit in our image, how we are viewed. Even, the whole point of BJP and Modi ji trying to be a Vishwa Guru, this is not what a Vishwa Guru should aspire. So if BJP is, on ground trying to do such petty things, to make just local elections work for them, on an international level, be it our tourism, be it how we are seen as a land of, we're a culinary haven. I mean, we are known as the land of butter chicken, and all of a sudden we are not supposed to sell mutton and chicken. Right. I don't understand, how India is even portraying itself. It's just petty.
Right. Vineet Vada, final word from you, given, the kind of last couple of years that you've all been through as restaurants right now. You probably just want, your business to get better and better and have no sort of hindrances.
It's funny that only a couple of days back that we've designed a Navratri menu, and we see people celebrating Navratri and also eating non-veg on the same table, and here we are in the middle of controversy, which is so very unnecessary and so non-essential. But definitely there looks to be a political interest behind all this. That's what I can say.
All right. Well, interesting that, some people ordering from the Navratri menu and some people ordering non-veg at the same table. And I think that really is the idea of India that we all want here. Thank you so much all for joining us on the program this morning.